The status quo has an incredible gravitational pull associated with it, and it takes a lot of energy to escape that gravitational pull. So organizations may make some progress by deploying new technology. We do this all the time in security, but inevitably over time, the gravitational pull of that status quo, the culture as we've known it, which did not evolve, pulls us back to the world that we're trying to move on from. What we do in cybersecurity actually enables the whole of society to flourish. I mean, in this day and age, that is absolutely true. Recently, I was working in a coffee shop in the village that I live in, and it was early in the morning. And outside the window, I could see moms and dads walking with their kids through the village square to school. And I was working on my laptop with a very large bank, helping them through a particular security challenge they were having. And I remember thinking as I looked outside at these folks walking across the square, what we're doing matters to every one of those people, but none of them know it. If you lose a global systemic financial institution like a large systemic bank, it doesn't just affect cities and nations. It affects the financial systems of entire continents, which undermines the fabric of society in a very tangible, very practical way. So this for me is both the great responsibility of working in cybersecurity, but also the privilege of working in cybersecurity. You can invest yourself in something that really, really matters. And I think if you have a North Star in your career that you want to invest yourself in work that's meaningful, that's consequential, you can't find an industry to work in that's more consequential than this one. So that's what I love about it the most. I'd give two pieces of advice. First of all, I would say, remember who you work for and why. Security, risk management, these are not an end in themselves. They both exist to enable your business, your organization, to achieve and sustain its goals and objectives. For a very long time, security organizations, also IT organizations, have defined themselves as separate from their business. You'll actually hear technology people, security folks, refer to the rest of their organization as the business. So, as though they were not a part of it. So we're over here in the security ivory tower doing what we do. All the business people are over there doing whatever it is they do. And the problem with that, straight out the gate, two things. Number one, that business signs our paychecks, which leads to number two, which is that the only reason that anyone in security even has a job is because we work for growing, successful, innovative businesses. So if you can remember that security's job is to enable your business to achieve and sustain its business goals and objectives, it will help you not to bias towards security controls that are overly risk-averse, unnecessarily risk-averse. It will help you to prioritize business enablement over stopping bad things happening, because those are two very different things. So remember who you work for and why. A second piece of advice I would give is be careful about being overly technology-centric in security. That might sound like kind of a weird thing to say, but security practitioners tend to have technology backgrounds. I include myself in this. Networks, infrastructure. That is a good thing, but it also has some consequences if you're not careful. One of those is that we tend to look at problems through technology lenses. And we tend to see solutions through technology lenses, and this predisposes us to what I would call silver bullet syndrome, which is technology is the answer, what's the question? That is not true. So technology can enable transformation, but it cannot sustain it. All sustainable transformation is a transformation of culture. So the 3 Bs, the beliefs, the biases, the behaviors of your organization, the way that you think about and approach security in your organization, if you don't also transform the way that you think about and approach security, the non-technical dynamics, any success you make in the short term, you can't sustain. You will find yourself drawn backwards towards where you were, and many of you will have experienced this. A great illustration of this is with Verizon. We all look forward to reading the Verizon data breach investigation reports that they do every year. They used to do one about PCI, so organizations that do payment card processing, payment card acquirers. And a really interesting thing they showed in the last one of these that they did was that a significant percentage of organizations that achieve PCI accreditation in year 1 fail an audit and lose that accreditation in year 2. Now, why is that? It's because organizations spend an inordinate amount of time and energy and money trying to get somewhere, but they don't consider what they need to do to stay there. And so, as I said, the status quo has an incredible gravitational pull associated with it. And it takes a lot of energy to escape that gravitational pull. So organizations may make some progress by deploying new technology. We do this all the time in security. But inevitably, over time, the gravitational pull of that status quo, the culture as we've known it, which did not evolve, pulls us back to the world that we're trying to move on from. So many people will be familiar with Peter Drucker's famous quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I would just like to say, actually, culture eats everything for breakfast, including that shiny new security toy that you just bought. It's the central role of identity in security. It's the identity as the modern perimeter idea. Attackers are becoming more identity-centric. The industry is still trying to catch up with the implications of identity becoming essentially the central focus of what we have to protect the best. If you go back to the early 90s, this is when enterprise firewalls came to the fore. Certainly this was before widespread cloud adoption, so it was very easy for organizations to draw a very stark dividing line, delineating their traditional network perimeter and delineating what was inside versus outside, what was trusted versus untrusted, what was us versus them. If you fast forward to the early 2000s now, with very widespread adoption of the internet, but now also adoption of cloud, you had organizations like Jericho Forum talking about deperimeterization. So the traditional network perimeter was eroding and was now contracting around assets themselves. And this is where we got the kind of endpoint as bastion idea. This is what led us into very advanced endpoint protections, EDR platforms. We've now taken another step towards the central role of identity in security. I think there's 3 reasons why this is happening. I think, first of all, if you look at modern access scenarios, especially post-COVID, oftentimes the user's corporate identity is the only common factor across all of the various domains. So you have people using networks that you can't control at their house, at the coffee shop. You have people using endpoints, depending on your bring your own device strategy, that you can't control or control as well as you might like. They're accessing data on systems that you don't control. They're accessing SaaS applications that are run by someone else. And so almost out of necessity, because it's the only common unifying factor across all of those components, the identity becomes the fulcrum around which all of these other pieces balance. I think a second reason why this is happening is attacker behavior. Attackers have always been identity focused. Effectively, every attack is an attack on identity at some point around the middle of the attack chain. Attackers try to get control of privileged identities so that they can get access to the data they want. But even though that's true, it's still shifted even further. So attacks, very common attacks in the news right now, compromising cloud-native identities, moving to cloud-native applications, compromising application service principals, connecting via API to cloud-native services, extracting data out of those services. Nothing about that attack sequence touches your endpoint. So if you're still focusing most of your attention on your devices, you're going to miss a lot, because those kinds of attacks don't trigger any endpoint controls. And if they do, by that point, it'll be far too late.